Aloha, everyone! This is Chesapeake Movie Thoughts, and it is no secret that I myself am a huge fan of classic Disney animation. So I thought I should do some shows that look into the classic Disney animated films. And what better place to start than where it all started with this one? This is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. So I just watched that again, and I got this is the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray for these Disney classics is the way to go. They look so beautiful on Blu-ray. We were talking about this is a work of visual art to begin with. It's paintings, background paintings, and hand drawn animation, and it's like having, especially when it's this crisp and clear, it is like having a painting on your wall when you're watching it on your television. It's like having a painting on your wall that just happens to move and tell a story. So that's one of the reasons I love these Disney classics, just because of how good they are just as a piece of visual art. And this is true of so many of Disney classics. And this, of course, being the first one, it certainly set the precedent for that, and it very much does so fit in that category. The It's a fascinating story. Oh, I suppose I should say, spoiler warning, if that matters. It's a 1937 film, but and it's based on a fairy tale that everybody already knows. But spoiler warnings, just in case you need that warning. But first though, I do want to mention the story behind the scenes, the story about how this movie got made, because it is the first. There was never a full length animated feature film before this, so it is the first of its kind, and like nobody thought it was going to work, except of course Walt Disney, who made it. But Walt Disney, he sunk everything he made some good money off of the success of Mickey Mouse and the Silly Symphony cartoons, but he sunk everything he had. This was a make or break movie for him, but he believed in it that much. He sunk so much into it, and everybody, the entire world, was telling him that a cartoon was fine for a 6 to 8 minute short, but no one's going to sit through a cartoon for a feature length for something like 90 minutes long. No one's going to sit through a cartoon that long. And Walt thought they were wrong, and he was right. And everybody, like the moment he showed this film to anybody, he screened it for the bank. From what I heard, there's stories about him screening it for a representative from the bank who wanted to pull the funding, and he said that the moment he had screened it for the bank, he didn't have any problems with him after that. The moment people saw this was a sensation. This was the biggest thing in movies that had pretty much ever hit up until that point. This was a sensation, and people were just shocked. And the reason it works so well is because the quality of the animation was so good. See, nobody realized how good of a performance that they could get out of an animated character. And it's hard to watch this now and not compare it to the kind of hand-drawn animation we get today, which generally is not really made for the theaters that much. It's made for television, because in theaters you only get CGI. Very rarely do you get anything else. And usually if you do get hand-drawn animation, it's a tie-in to a TV show, so it keeps up that style from the TV show. But here, the characters are able to act and act subtly. They're able to get across subtle things. You think of the animated characters today, the 2D animated characters today, just see on television, and they can have really exaggerated expressions. You can see when they're happy or when they're angry, but when the queen at the beginning of this movie learns that Snow White is the fairest in the land, her only response to that is to say the name Snow White. But in the acting, in the performance, the body language, the expression, you're getting a sense of haughty indignation. Now what how are you going to get across haughty indignation from the overly simplified characters that we get today? You just can't, and it's sad that we've lost that. But you can still find it in these old films, and at least there's that. At least you can go back there, because that is the magic of animation to me. It's the I do believe in magic, in a sense. I believe that it is possible for, in some cases, for something to add up to more than the sum of its parts, and good animation does that. And like 2 plus 2 just doesn't equal 5, but in an animated film it can, and that is a form of magic to me. I'm skeptical about a lot of like extraordinary claims, but if you tell me that kind of magic is real, that I will believe you in, because I see it. I see it. It's line drawings and ink and paint, but you get life, or at least a convincing simulation of it on the screen. That's amazing, and that's magic, and that's like really the only kind of real magic that may exist, outside of like illusions. But that is really impressive about these old animated films, and that's why I love them. This one, in particular, I noticed that the songs there's a lot of songs, and they're really good songs. They are different from, like, if you've grown up on the Renaissance, the Disney Renaissance films, the songs always were kind of formulaic. They like had their formulaic part to play in the film. Not so much here. It was more like, oh, I think we can fit a song in this scene, and I think the song might spice up that scene here or there. I think that's more like what they were thinking. It was the first film, so it really wasn't following a formula. And there's a lot of music. It's a simple story, and the songs do help to extend it to feature length. So the kind of padding, but yeah, I'll accept that kind of padding because they're so much fun. It takes actually a while for the Dwarfs to come in, but the Dwarfs I was paying close attention to on this viewing, because I started to notice how vaudevillian they were. It was like a 7-man old style comedy team. It's like the Three Stooges or the Marx Brothers, but with seven members, and it works. And I got some really good laughs, and again, that's where the quality of the animation, that style of humor would not work without that quality of animation, because you need to be a good actor, a good comedy actor, and have that good comedy timing to sell that kind of humor, and that really works here. And the imagery throughout this. So some beautiful imagery and some frightening imagery. I know how Disney has a reputation for sanitizing the stories that they make into movies. How some of these fairy tales can be very dark in their original versions, and Disney sanitizes them, and that reputation is well founded. That is what they do. But at the same time, I'm also recall how Disney also has a reputation for scaring the ever-loving pants off of kids in certain scenes in their movies. And in, like, Snow White's one of the ones that are cited, like the scene where she's running from the forest. She's just learned that her stepmother wants to kill her. She's running through the forest, and all of the branches seem to turn into hands clawing at her, and the music is getting more intense. And people have talked about how that scared them as a child, and plus there were other scenes where the queen transforms into the witch, and people talk about it, and it was like, yeah, this is some like very intense, scary imagery, especially for the young children that this is aimed at. And it's odd that Disney has that reputation for being very very dark and scary in that regard. Yet at the same time, it's also accused of over sanitizing these films. But yeah, it's kind of both. They're kind of both true. I mean, Disney will sanitize certain. They kind of know. They kind of know what they're doing, though. They kind of know where you can scare kids and where to soften the blow. and I kind of respect them for that. Um, but I uh, I did want to mention the just how much I was watching this, and I noticed just how much more effective it was, where they don't show Snow White actually collapsing when she's poisoned. They show the only thing they show is they show her. They just pan down, and her arm just falls into frame, and the hand, the apple just rolls out of her hand. And I thought, wow, that is so much more effective emotionally and artistically than just showing her drop, just showing her like having this, just showing her what happens to her body. Just they leave that to her imagination, to our imagination, as she's collapsing on the floor, and they just show the hand and the apple. And that's a famous image. There's a lot of like famous images. A lot of you take a lot of things stills from this movie, and they just be famous images. The dwarfs on their way home, crossing over the bridge. The skull face, and when the poison drips across the apple, and that's just as a piece of art, it's amazing. And that's what I love about these movies. I keep saying that, but there's, uh, but Snow White herself is sometimes criticized as not being a good role model, not being an active protagonist, not playing an active part in her own life. She doesn't do things, make her own decisions that move the plot forward. She just reacts to the plot as it's happening to her, and if that's true. But I mean, life is very broad. There's a lot of different aspects to life. So when people like have this narrow view of the movies, like the protagonist always has to be active. Well, it's good when the protagonist is active, but there's not that many films nowadays with a protagonist like this who just kind of reacts, and yeah, that's kind of worth seeing too. And I have to admire her because she has a quality that I don't think I quite mastered myself. But I try. It's one thing I strive for, and that's this ability to just bounce back from whatever she was terrified in one scene, and then the next scene she is just as happy and chipper and joyful, and she just let it roll off her back. I mean, and it's like she's learned she's targeted for murder, and she's reacting like she's in a theme park in the next scene. And you can say that's inconsistent, but I say that is what I want. That I want to be able to just recapture joy that easily, no matter what life throws at me. So I do admire Snow White for that, even if if she's just reacting instead of being proactive. There are still things to learn from it. Any of these parents that are saying, "I don't want my kids to watch," these movies where they get the message that you should be weak-willed and passive, that you can get good morals out of this. I mean, you can teach your kids what to take from these films, and if you can take the message to take life as it is and find joy in that, in whatever life gives you, that's a good message. And it's one that Snow White embodies, and I think that Snow White is a relevant character today, in part because of that. Anyway, I love this movie. I love most Disney animated classics. I love this movie, and I love watching it on Blu-ray. If I'm most of you probably seen it. It's one of the movies we all grow up on, and that's another testament to its power, is that it keeps getting re-released for generation after generation. So we've all seen it, and it means something to all of us. But if you haven't seen it in a while, try watching it again. Look for things you haven't seen before, little bits and pieces. It's always fun to do. Like, comment, subscribe, and that's a wrap.